Alright, originally this episode was going to be about Three Kingdoms video games, and it still is, but I won't lie to you. I dropped the ball. In a nutshell, I'm running out of time, I couldn't get my hands on nearly half as many games as I wanted, and instead of rushing through this topic and doing it half-assed, I'm instead going to be repurposing some of it for one last hoorah for Three Kingdoms month. However, I do want to, and still plan on doing, a full-fledged video about Three Kingdoms video games at some point in the future. When that point will be, I honestly don't know. Total War pretty much comes out in a day, and at this point, I want to talk about that. With the influencers, a term I hate pretty much because I'm not one, playing the release version now, or at least one that's very close to it, I have to say a lot of my fears and concerns have finally been settled. Just by watching it for myself, the game looks like it's good. I no longer have to give up on life and become a hermit in the woods, hopefully. If this game isn't good after the disaster that Dynasty Warriors 9 was, I might just give up on life and become a hermit in the woods. The game's getting some pretty good review scores from the major outlets, but as we know, a lot of the time they don't necessarily mean jack shit, so I'm not fully trusting anything yet until the game is in my hands. Or rather, installed on my computer, which it already is, due to the preload, but you understand what I'm trying to say, I hope. There is still some stuff I'm concerned about, but I'm not here to dampen the mood for the last episode of Three Kingdoms month. So far it's been a fun little adventure. We looked at one of my favorite mods, some great shows, some silly stories, and now it's on to the games. Aside from this Total War game, I think everyone who's watching this video has at least heard of one Three Kingdoms game before. It's the elephant in the room. I've been using clips and music from it since my channel began. It was the subject of my first successful video game review, Dynasty Warriors. The action hack and slash game from Koei is probably the most well-known Three Kingdoms video game series out there. I think I speak for many when I say that Dynasty Warriors was the first introduction to the Three Kingdoms period and Romance of the Three Kingdoms for quite a few of us. It certainly was for me, and Dynasty Warriors holds a special place in my heart and nostalgia, for better and for worse. Dynasty Warriors has a reputation, if you will. A lot of people say that they're awful button-mashing, no-thought video games. But you know what? When they literally just slapped a Zelda skin on it, a lot of those same people ate that shit up like candy, so they can go fuck themselves. I am a big Dynasty Warriors fan, as you can imagine, but I'm not a blind fan. These games are definitely not perfect, especially the older ones. They have a history of awful voice acting, terrible slowdown and graphical bugs, and each game is essentially a remake of the last one, but we are going to put an asterisk on that last one because they change it up tremendously from game to game. On the flip side, Dynasty Warriors is just fun. You have to be a certain kind of person to appreciate them though, I won't lie. It has to be the perfect storm of pretty much the following. You have to like beat-em-ups like Streets of Rage and Golden Axe, you have to like over-the-top crazy anime stuff, and you have to at least be slightly interested or entertained by video games about history. If that sounds like you, and you've never actually tried Dynasty Warriors, well, you probably would like it. Now there's plenty of Dynasty Warriors games to choose from, so naturally you'd ask, well, which Dynasty Warrior should I play? Ah, my friend, that is a whole separate video for a whole separate time, because there's like 30 of these games. I think there's actually more, if you count all of the spin-offs. But for a quick and dirty answer, if you want to experience the story of the Three Kingdoms and get to know the major players, the go-to game for that, which I always recommend, is Dynasty Warriors 7. 7 has a story mode for each of the Three Kingdoms that wisely focuses on only a handful of characters, highlighting the important people and events when they are important. If you want a game packed with as much content as possible, while staying true to the spirit of Dynasty Warriors, then Dynasty Warriors 8 is the one I would recommend. It has story modes like 7, and it offers multiple characters for each battle this time around instead of just one, but it isn't nearly as focused, and it can be somewhat messy in how it tells the story, leaving a lot of characters undeveloped, or you just question, where'd this guy come from? Why is that guy there? On the flip side, its story mode offers entirely new and original hypothetical story branches. There's also no shortage of replayability on these battles in free mode. Ambition mode is way more fun than Conquest mode in 7, at least in my opinion. If neither of those games sounds appealing, then maybe you might actually like Dynasty Warriors 9. Dynasty Warriors 9 shifted to an open world format and a new combat system that I was just not a fan of. It also ditched the excellent cast of voice actors the series had been carrying for the past few games in favor of new ones, which just don't do the script justice. Nowadays, it seems like Koei has a monopoly on Three Kingdoms video games. with Dynasty Warriors and also their flagship strategy game, Romance of the Three Kingdoms. The ROTK games go all the way back to the original NES and concurrent PC releases at the time too, and it is a series that has evolved significantly over time. Unlike most strategy games based on famous wars, the ROTK games, especially the more recent ones, have a strong focus on administration and character dynamics, empire management, all that kind of stuff, making it much more like a grand strategy game than a tactical war game. But as I was saying, Koei is the most well-known company for Three Kingdoms games, but they are by no means the only ones making them, just the most popular. A simple search on Steam turns up quite a number of Three Kingdoms games. A lot of them are mobile games from the East ported over, but if anything, it shows just how popular the story is in East Asia and how profitable it's been over the years. Naturally, pretty much all of the Three Kingdoms games out there are from Asia. Most of them come from Japan, and then there's some others that come from China. Total War Three Kingdoms is the first time a major Western developer will be trying their hands at the setting, so that alone makes it interesting to see. Besides Koei, the other famous company that actually made a few Three Kingdoms games in the past was Capcom. Capcom's Three Kingdoms games tend to be forgotten about. They only made a handful, but the ones they did make stand out very much. The first one is an NES game called Destiny of an Emperor. It's a top-down JRPG, sort of like Final Fantasy. But it also gives me an old-school Ultima vibe with how it's structured, especially the way you talk and converse with NPCs. You play as Liu Bei, and you travel from town to town with your sworn brothers, collecting officers for your army. It starts with you rallying your forces to fight the Yellow Turban Rebellion, but the story goes much further than that. The way the battles work in this game is not all that different from an old Final Fantasy game, except instead of characters fighting individually, their hit points instead represent the amount of soldiers under their control, and battles are you pitting your regiments in your army against the opposing army's regiments. Like in almost any RPG, you'll have random encounters with various enemies, and when you encounter an enemy officer, you might even be able to recruit them after the battle. There's a massive amount of playable characters in the game for a JRPG, enough to easily rival something like Suikoden and Chrono Cross, which came years later. The other two Capcom Three Kingdoms games were arcade beat-em-ups. The first one is called Dynasty Wars in the West, which shocks me how there was never a lawsuit between Capcom and Koei. The next one was a far superior game called Warriors of Fate in the West. It tells the classic Three Kingdoms story we know and love. You know, Shang Lo, a country ruled by murder and violence under the iron fist of the Dark Lord Aquila Orkhan. Having driven his own country into ruin and despair, Aquila Orkhan now cast his covetous eyes on his neighboring countries. As his conquering shadows spread, one man rose up against this black tide. His name was Quan Ti. With the aid of the 5 greatest warriors and the one wisest mind in his realm, Quan Ti would fight to defend the people and lands. The battle begins. Ah yes, who can forget our favorite Three Kingdoms heroes like Portor and Kassar and Genghis Khan's famous general Subutai. Actually, for some weird reason, the English translation of this game nixed all the references to Three Kingdoms in favor of a loose fantasy setting with Mongolian-esque names for everything. But make no mistake, it is a game based on Romance of the Three Kingdoms. The 5 playable characters in the game are Guan Yu, Zhang Fei, Zhao Yun, Huang Zhong, 4 of the 5 Tiger Generals, and Wei Yan. Why they didn't opt for Ma Chao instead, I don't know. The game follows Liu Bei's army from the Battle of Bo Wang Po to the Battle of Bi. And there's a good ending and a bad ending depending on if you manage to defeat Cao Cao in time or not. As a beat 'em up, it's par for course, but still pretty fun. I had a blast playing through it with 2 of my friends, Nick and Brandon, and we recorded the whole game, only for it to turn out that it didn't record right and everything's cut off on the side. I'm hoping to be able to re-record it in the future soon so I can have a version of it on my second channel. A few things that struck me as interesting about this game. First, I always get a laugh at how some Three Kingdoms characters just look virtually the same in almost everything, and you can pick them out so easily. Another thing that's a bit odd is Guan Yu and Zhang Fei don't fight with weapons except on horseback, while every other character does. They are somewhat of this game's grappler characters, I guess, especially Zhang Fei, so it works, it's just odd, especially because they have iconic weapons associated with them. Now, we played this game on the Capcom Beat 'em Up bundle, where it's available in both the English and Japanese version. The only complaint I have is that we experienced a lot of lag and slowdown when there were a lot of enemies on screen while playing online, which could have just been a connection issue, but we also don't have that problem with any of the other games in the bundle, so I don't know. Overall though, I love the sprite work of this game the best. It's just really cool and detailed and just awesome to look at. Speaking of good sprite work, in 1995, a company from Taiwan made a Three Kingdoms fighting game sort of in the vein of Street Fighter II Turbo called Sanko Fighters and Sanko Fighters 2. Sanko Fighters 2 is the superior game by a long shot. It has many more characters and stages. It's only a 2-button fighting game, with punch and kick being your only attacks. Despite its simplicity, it plays fairly well. There are special moves done with Mortal Kombat style inputs like back forward and down forward, and there's also super moves and simple combos. The other nice thing about this game is that it's available for free, completely legal, with gamepad support and everything. You do have to emulate it though through DOSBox. I played this one with my longtime fighting game buddy Justin, and at first we were a little dismayed. It ran like shit, it was clunky, like 10 frames a second, had awful sounding music, but as soon as we tweaked some option settings like turning the background animations off, increasing the game speed, and changing the music processor, it became an absolute blast. It went from like a 4 to an 8. It honestly makes me want a modern Three Kingdoms fighting game, maybe in the style of Samurai Showdown or Soul Calibur or something like that. Now what about strategy games? Well, there's a few. And for this video, the one I decided to go with was Three Kingdoms Fate of the Dragon. And I would love to show it to you, I really would, but I can't get the damn thing to work on my computer. That's $10 down the drain. I've tried everything from compatibility modes to emulation through DOSBox. The only thing I didn't try was running it on a virtual machine. What, you think I just have a Windows 95 key lying around? Basically, Fate of the Dragon is an RTS, and everything I've seen about it looks really cool. Like a mix between Seven Kingdoms, Age of Empires, and a real-time city builder game. Unfortunately, I can't play it, so I can't tell you how good it is. Damn, I knew I should have gone with Dragon Throne Battle of Red Cliffs instead. Before we end it, other honorable mentions I could not get my hands on. Koei also has 2 other Three Kingdoms games, the short-lived Dynasty Tactics series, which is kind of like Final Fantasy Tactics or Fire Emblem, and Kessen 2, which is a real-time tactics game. There's also the Koihime Muso visual novel games, and one funny piece of trivia is that their names parody the way Koei named their Dynasty Warriors games in Japan. There's also a separate beat-em-up series named Knights of Valor, which is still going to this day and has a latest release on the PS4 as an exclusive. There is a Three Kingdoms board game for Tabletop Simulator, which seems pretty cool, but I haven't gotten a chance to play it yet. And most interestingly, even though it's not a video game, the card game Magic the Gathering had a set of Three Kingdoms cards released as part of their Portal series in 1999. You can find examples of them online pretty easily. But now, with Total War Three Kingdoms on the horizon, it's time to put Three Kingdoms Month to rest for the time being as we prepare to either be heartbroken or to fall in love with a game that has kept my attention since it was first announced. A game I've literally wanted and dreamt about since elementary school is finally a reality. So without further ado, I thank each and every one of you who joined this journey with me while we waited for this game. We debunked myths and rumors, we did some of our own speculation, got into some minor controversy, and reacted to trailer after trailer after trailer. For those that have been here since the beginning, thank you. I love seeing your comments, I love talking to you guys. It means a lot, and I hope you continue to stick around. But for now, enjoy the game, for better or for worse. Fingers crossed. I mean, no Three Kingdoms game ends up being perfect anyway, it's part of the pattern at this point.